Where do you see this like moving forward from a technological standpoint for gaming in your company?
Yeah, so I mean, we fully believe in this entire ecosystem, and I think one of the interesting ways to think about spatial computing, as they call it, XR, whatever you want to call it, is that it's not one thing or the other, it's a spectrum, right? And one of the amazing things that Apple Vision does, and that you see Meta starting to work in, and you see kind of all these headsets coalescing around, is the acceptance of pass-through. And it's not just that people are going to make MR experiences and people are going to make VR experiences. What you're going to see is, especially in the app space, someone starting in an MR, in a purely spatial windowed experience, bringing that out to a much more much more immersive MR experience, and then saying, all right, I'm ready, and going all the way in and then back out and jumping between those modalities. We see that in PC all the time, right? Sometimes your app is small, sometimes it's full screen, sometimes it's taking over everything. And that is accepted in this established platform. And so I, kind of getting around to it is like, this isn't just Gen 1 hardware, this is Gen 1 software, this is Gen 1 everything. And so we're just finally at the stage today where we can approach spatial as that singular spectrum of media, right? And it's less, no headset that's out right now is good or bad, they're all poking at different areas of what's possible. Hi, I'm Andrew Ike, CE Owl at Alchemy Labs.
Andrew, you were here at GDC. What are you doing here at GDC?
We're doing a number of things at GDC. I'm giving a talk, which is very fun, and we're also showing off the cafe demo that we've been showing off in years previously, as well as just meeting with folks like yourself and other developers to chat about XR and all the great things that are happening in the industry right now.
Now, you guys have always been on the cutting edge of like VR dev. Now the Apple Vision Pro is coming in. You guys did something for that. What was it like working on that platform?
With every new platform, there's always like things that the platform does incredibly well and then challenges that we have to work through. And the Apple Vision Pro is like a really fantastic platform to work on. It's amazing having all the compute power that you have. But, we had to work through a bunch of different things because we were essentially 3 different companies working together, right? So it's not just us writing Apple, it's us writing on Unity and then Unity working with Apple, right? And so there's been a lot of like close communication between the 3 different companies to try to get everything right.
On the back end of stuff, like how was the transition of working in VR to moving to something like the Apple Vision Pro?
For us, in a very practical sense, there's almost nothing that's different for when we were doing the porting work, right? So those 2 games are fully immersive. We are well versed in hand tracking. So we understand kind of the breadth of what needs to be done and how to kind of manipulate our games into that space. And then as from the perspective of where we're at, right, this is a fully immersive game. So we're taking over your whole space. We're not working in anything MR right now. And so it's great from that sense, is that we get to kind of be that bridge step where we're like, okay, you know us and what we do, and we're gonna grab your entire environment.
Now, like in terms of how fast technology has been moving this last decade, do you think we'll ever get to the point where you have like a streamlined process, or is it constantly always on the edge, always learning every time there's something new in the environment?
I mean, I think it depends on how you define process, right? I think from a consumer perspective, you're going to get a streamlined process, and you see the platforms starting to coalesce and come together. And I think for consumers, that's great. I think in the games, in the game space specifically, so in the app space, you are absolutely going to get a streamlined process. And I think one of the best things that Apple Vision Pro did is actually create a unified language for putting apps on there and an expectation from users for how those apps get put on there, right? I think the way that they brought Swift UI into that ecosystem is great, and it's something we've been advocating for, in a very developer terms, a widget library for XR. Now, when you get to games, right, we're never happy, and neither are consumers, right? The games, like in my talk, I say, games are pretty much, they're a piece of software whose main output is emotions, right? And so it's always going to be creating and innovating and seeing how you can push the platform and even push the edges of what the platform is capable and what the platform is doing. And so when we're thinking about building games, right, yes, we may start coming up with common language, but as we come up with common language, we are going to have to explore the boundaries, right? And one kind of deep dive into this is when you think about it, right? Film, there was an Oscar speech recently where film just said, hey, Christopher Nolan said, it's 100 years, and I'm glad you honored me for 100 years in film. And think of how well established we think of film, right? Film is 100 years. The novel is thousands of years, right? As an art form. Video games, we measure that in decades. XR, VR games, we measure in we're approaching the 10-year mark of the launch of the HTC Vive and the CV1, right? And so we're so nascent, we're so early in these days that we really need to explore. So there's going to be a long time of figuring out what this medium is and what it's capable of and what our design language ultimately looks like.
You know, it's funny because people always like are ragging on the Apple Vision Pro and all the time, but at the same time, it's Gen 1's hardware. I mean, you worked on one of the early VR editions. Those things were goggles strapped together with like duct tape practically, you know? Like it's Gen 1, it's rough, you know? Like where do you see this like moving forward from a technological standpoint for gaming and your company?
Yeah, so I mean, we fully believe in this entire ecosystem. And I think one of the interesting ways to think about spatial computing, as they call it, XR, whatever you want to call it, is that it's not one thing or the other, it's a spectrum, right? And one of the amazing things that Apple Vision does and that you see Meta starting to work in, and you see kind of all these headsets coalescing around, is the acceptance of pass-through. And it's not just that people are going to make MR experiences and people are going to make VR experiences. What you're going to see is, especially in the app space, someone starting in an MR and a purely spatial windowed experience, bringing that out to a much more immersive MR experience, and then saying, all right, I'm ready, and going all the way in and then back out and jumping between those modalities. We see that in PC all the time, right? Sometimes your app is small, sometimes it's full screen, sometimes it's taking over everything. And that is accepted in this established platform. And so kind of getting around to it is like, this isn't just Gen 1 hardware, this is Gen 1 software, this is Gen 1 everything. And so we're just finally at the stage today where we can approach spatial as that singular spectrum of media, right? And it's no headset that's out right now is good or bad. They're all poking at different areas of what's possible.
Now, in your professional opinion, based off your VR research, do you think we skipped the AR segment, or do you think it'll come back around? Because I feel like we went straight to the XR experience and passed through, and AR kind of got put on the back burner for a hot minute.
I think when you're talking about like AR, I'm going to assume what you're referring to is kind of the glasses state of the world, right?
Yeah.
And I think the thing that you see with the glasses state, and one of the issues is that you're fighting physics, right? And we still haven't quite got there with the physics. What everybody wants is a perfect pair of glasses, like the size of sunglasses, that goes on your face, that does everything. And I just don't think that we need the technology to catch up to that.
Right.
So if we go all the way back to the original Oculus, why did the original duct tape headset work? And it was because cell phones had driven the technology so far for displays that we were finally capable of taking a display, marrying it with a bunch of sensors that weren't that capable until that moment, and bringing it all together in a single cohesive package. We don't have currently the Lego bricks, so to speak, to make an AR headset. So we just need more R&D time. But the incredible thing is that pass-through has moved so fast that we can look at the idealized state, right? And we can start pushing there. And I think that that's really important, right? You want to build things and software as if it were idealized. The way that people should think is not that we skipped AR, it's that when AR eventually happens, we're going to be so well versed in what putting like shit in your environment is and could be that we're not going to be starting from zero and trying to fight both the hardware and the software, which is really where you ultimately want to go.
How do you feel about your company always being on we said this before, the cutting edge of technology all the time? You're always on the right cusp. Like the Apple Vision Pro is brand new, just came out, like you said, Gen 1, first of its kind, right? And you're right there already making games for it. Like, is it like, describe that feeling? Is it exciting? Is it stressful? Like, is it?
I mean, it's all of the above, right? So from a personal perspective, I have always been working in the edge of technology.
Right.
I went to the first Amazon Cloud conference that ever happened, right? I went to OC1, right? I've done this. It's been like a personal thing of mine. I think a lot of people at Alchemy feel the same way. But I also think that, like, we are a company built on taking big swings at technology that we believe is near term to us and seeing it pay off in the face of numerous people telling us otherwise. When we started, multiple people had told the original 4 founders to absolutely do not build a company around VR. That's insanity. You will fail. It's miserable. We're 70 people now, right? We're owned by Google. Like, we have succeeded in by every metric beyond what those folks could have imagined. And I see the same things happening in hand tracking, right? The interesting thing to me is that the size of the swing we can take is actually just getting smaller because the technology is becoming more accepted. So the difference between switching from a mobile studio to a VR studio is a much bigger than switching from a VR studio that does controllers to a VR studio that does hand tracking, right? And that's actually really encouraging to see, is that we're starting to coalesce around a singular kind of acceptance of this medium. Because there was a path where it petered out, right? Where it went the way of 3D TVs. And in fact, you probably read many articles where people were like, is VR the next 3D
Sony
TV?
just stopped printing their PS2 headset due to low numbers. They just released that a few days ago, yeah.
And I mean, whether or not, right, like to me, that's a business strategy thing versus like, because the counterpoint to that is that, I did a session with Unity on the Vision Pro, and it was the most attended webinar, right? All the Vision Pro sessions at GDC at this conference have lines out the door, right? People are very interested in XR right now, right? So it's up to us to capitalize on that excitement and really push the medium forward when we have the wind at our back.
Do you think we'll eventually get to the point where you have your sunglasses and it gives you the full XR experience? And how, in your personal, professional opinion, how far do you think we are from that?
I mean, we are so do I think we will get there? Eventually, yes, right? People are pushing on it. If I had to predict, I would say we're 10 years out from one that has a umbilical cord going down into your pocket that people regularly use. We just are missing a few pieces, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the funny, almost developments is, had we found a room temperature stable superconductor, the glasses may have happened, right? There's just certain things that we're just waiting to happen. Waveguide is a very interesting technology that may be the key, right? There might be some technology that's being researched right now that we don't realize is the key, right? We know prismatic lenses are not it, right? They're big, they're bulky, they have very low field of view. And we also know that consumers are very discerning, right? There's a few people who will play in the space of the future, but consumers are not gonna mess around with a 30-degree FOV that looks like a postage stamp on your face. They want the whole thing or nothing, right? And so I think to me, we're a decade off of that, right? And so you can see some people accepting that and actually playing with that strategy and thinking about things like, okay, what if we build glasses that have audio only in them, right? And a camera, right? And you see that with the Ray-Ban Meta glasses, right? Or you see, Apple playing with the AirPods, right? Which is a form of that, where you can just have a chat with a virtual assistant. And so I think bigger picture, and when I say 10 years, what I mean is something that a regular person will wear.
Right.
We might next year see AR glasses, but they're still gonna be a little bulky, a little too cyberpunk for a person. And the thing you have to remember too about glasses versus a VR headset is a headset you use at home. So the bar to get a headset on someone's face is much lower. Glasses, you walk out in the world. The bar is very high from a fashion point, right? Because people consider them part of their, who they are and how they look and what they do. And so the bar is really, really high. You have to make them work, and consumers won't accept too many restrictions.
It reminds me a lot of plasma TVs. When those came out, they were tens of thousands of dollars. Now you
Yeah.
can go get an OLED for like $1,000 at Costco.
Yeah.
Like it just takes it's you talked about, it's that gap of becoming cheaper, more affordable to get to a consumer standpoint. They may exist in a military capacity now. They may, but like we won't see it for 10 years. On a consumer level.
Right, and I think that even from that, there's still a few like R&D breakthroughs we need to
Right.
have. But yeah, as far as like, I think what you're talking about is actually most true for the headsets, right? Is that we see a device that is on the high end of consumer technology that has like not held back across anything, right? And to me, that's the plasma TV mark. That's that $30,000 sitting, I remember as a kid, I went to New York City, I saw the Today Show set as you walk by, because that's what you do. You walk by all these famous places, right? And I saw they had all the TVs. This is gonna date me to exactly how old I am. And it was like, $200,000 because it was all those, it was like 7 TVs. And it was like, oh my God, right? And now it's like, yeah, whatever.
You can
Like,
go to Costco, grab a few, whatever.
or you get a TV when you just sign up for a new bank account. They're like, here's a plasma TV, right? I think that Office Michael Scott joke, if you remember it, where he has the tiny little TV, wouldn't fly.
that's right.
Yeah,
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 that's
wouldn't
right, yeah.
fly today.
I finally broke down and bought myself a plasma TV. Check it out. I actually hung this on the wall myself. It's good. I want to show you something. A lot of people in the room. You need more space. Voila, right into the wall. Wow.
As a developer, is it frustrating? Because I feel like the software is always outpacing the hardware constantly. Like you have this great idea, this great concept, and then the technology for it's just not available, not affordable, or in some cases not even invented yet. But you have the idea ready to go.
So I actually feel in VR it's the opposite right now,
Interesting.
where
Okay.
software bound more than hardware bound. So I agree with you. There's many times where you have this wonderful idea or we want to do something, but at the state we are in VR, when you're a developer, a lot of what you have to do is catch up, right? So all that stuff when I talk about like there's a widget and a thing, if you're making a 2D app that you want to bring to Vision, it works wonderfully. If you're making a fully immersive app like we are, you get Unity and everyone gets the same thing. And so we're software bound in a way because yes, Unity offers an interaction toolkit, right? Some other folks offer these kind of base layers, but they're not the way that I interact with Unity as Alchemy Labs, the way that we interact with it is very different from if you were to set out to make a 2D or 3D like third person action game. And the tools that you would have at your disposal for that are enormous and you have all these wonderful packages at work. And in VR, we have almost none of that because for various reasons, it's not performant enough, right? We have extreme performance requirements, right? It was never built with VR in mind. It breaks some rule of VR, right? It expects controllers, it has all these things. So we have to start, and many studios that are starting fresh have to start completely from scratch, right? It sounds so simple, but the thought of putting like an Alchemy style slap button in VR is actually like very difficult, and there's very few places where if you were to start a company tomorrow, you could just like have the button and press the button, right? So we're lagging behind because we can't develop. What's holding us back in developing at speed is not that the hardware isn't capable. It's that every time we think of an idea, we have to create the software from scratch.
So that's what slows you down. That's the R&D. That's the process that really slows.
That's the process, right? And why do Alchemy games take so well? Alchemy games take a while for a few reasons. One of them is that, and the other is because we build all these systems on systems on systems, and then like you add one thing and the whole domino set falls down, and then you're like, we got to reset it back up. But yeah, why are there so many shooters, right? Because it's easy to detect the trigger and raycast out from there, right? Why aren't there, the question that, and we ask ourselves this all the time, why aren't there a lot of clones of Job Simulator, right? Job Simulator is a top 10 game on every platform it's launched on, right? Vacation Simulator performs incredibly well. Cosmonious High charted all the way up to 20 at some point, right? Like, why aren't there more of that? And the answer is because you have to start from scratch, and it's really hard.
You know, it's interesting. I know there's a lot of stuff you're working on you can't talk about, but back in the day where HTC Vive was introducing trackers, stuff several years ago, that were the size that were huge. They were huge trackers, that gigantic.
Yeah.
Now we're at that point where like they're built into the headset, and that was this last decade.
Yeah.
Like I can't imagine the tools and stuff you'll be able to use in another decade from now, and like how that's constantly changing. As from a financial point of view and running a company, like does it make you like nervous when you have to, maybe try to invest time, energy, and R&D on something that might not become the standard, or is so cutting edge you're not sure where it will go 4 years now, if it will still be even supported?
But kind of like back of the hand thing that you're supposed to do at a company is you're only supposed to make a decision when you're 70% sure. Because once you're 100% sure, once you're 90% sure or more, then other people have also made that decision, right? And you're not moving first if that's what you're trying to do. Or you've waited too long and the opportunity will close itself. So we make these decisions, right? And yeah, it's, to get into boring business terms, there's a lot of risk you manage. And so the risks we take are technological, but we don't necessarily take risks in other areas, right? Like we're bringing our games to Apple Vision, but we're bringing games that we know, right? So we're not doing it, you think about it, right? And there's like a number of risks you could take on each game, right? And that number is about 2, right? So our next game that is, what we've announced so far is it's multiplayer and hand-tracked. That's 2 risks, right?
Yeah.
We haven't released a hand-tracked game built from scratch. We haven't done multiplayer, but we're not going to do a third, right? we're not going to be like, and it's like a cartwheeling third-person shooter, like, yeah, kind of game. But so it's like you kind of pick your battles there. And so our battles tend to be in that technological forefront. And, when we're thinking about the business, right? Some of it too is we want to go where we believe the users will go. So it's less that we want to drive technology forward and more we want to go where users want to go. And we want to make games that people want to play, right? And we've seen that our games are popular. I do wish there were more like simulator-esque games, and we think about that a lot, but I think that as time goes on, we're going to start seeing the underlying libraries and stuff finally get to mature states, and then you'll start seeing more complex interactions than like shoot, punch, kick, right? Which are wonderful. Like I'm not ragging on those games. What I'm saying is that there is like a cornucopia of them, right? There's a plethora of these games, right? So it's not that they are good or bad. It's just that we are not lacking for shooters.
And my last question for you is, from an outsider looking in that enjoys your games, or maybe they're XR enthusiast or VR enthusiast, what's the biggest misconception about your job?
About CEOwl?
Yeah.
I think the biggest misconception. So so developer to developer, the biggest misconception is that my job is anything that can be nailed down, right? I'm kind of doing a lot, and like a lot of my job is. Some of it's like setting vision and figuring out what we're working on. Some of it's like rallying the team. Some of it's like doing interviews or getting in the weeds or meeting with all these people and preparing this. I like have to live both 2 years in the future and right now at the same time, right? And then from external people, the amount of stuff that's just company stuff. There's just like company stuff.
Risk assessment and
But not even more
Stocks.
like boring than that. Like the amount of times I have to be like, oh, we have to contact our payroll processor because the like numbers don't match between these 2 things, or oh, they blocked our credit card again because we went to the like CVS and charged it and they thought that was bad, and now we're not going to be able to pay for our advertisements. Like
riveting game dev stuff.
But it's a company, so like yes, it's like there's like probably about 60% of my job is like game dev stuff, right? It's like good game dev stuff, but then 40% of my job is just like keeping the engine of the company moving, and I'm just sitting on some call with like somebody going like, why am I doing this again, right? Like what am I, or like, yeah, calling FedEx and trying to figure out why our packages are taking too long, right? I don't know that's, if you want to run a company, that's what running a company is, right? You can do fun stuff sometimes, and sometimes you got to call FedEx.